Well, there we go. So I promised I would come back on and go live again. I won't make this too long. I promised. I almost didn't. I said, no. I put up the story saying I would go live again. So for anyone that didn't tune in earlier, I did 2 live streams at the beach. I do these in my footsteps podcast kind of post game shows called Without a Map. And I did 2 in a row on Fridays at 5 at the beach. And last week, I should have known better. Last week's one kind of was not blurry, but the live video was less than stellar. And it's because the Wi-Fi wasn't great. So this week, I wanted to go to another beach. And when I got done doing the live stream, I take my phone and I say, here's where I'm at, and show you the beach. The Wi-Fi was terrible, and twice my live stream died and cut off before I could save it. So, let's see. Without a map, I've done this twice before. So, basically what I do with these is a post-game show for my podcast. For anyone that hasn't listened to it, the podcast before, it's New England travel, history, some nostalgia. I'm a kid of the 1980s, so I share that a lot on there. And I dive a little deeper in these live streams than I do on the podcast. I try to keep those very regimented. And this is a way to kind of interact with anyone that has listened to the podcast or watched the videos that go up on YouTube. This, fingers crossed, won't crap out on me and will go up on YouTube and IGTV. I decided to do this from home rather than go to another beach and risk it. So the podcast's newest episode went up yesterday, episode 12. I don't give them specific names. I just go with the number and I tell you what's in them. I find that kind of will sell it. I don't want to give it some fancy name and then people tune in and say, that's nothing like what I thought. So I basically say episode 12. The important, like the main story that I tell is my Ancestry DNA results. So if anyone out there hasn't done Ancestry or gone on the website, I did a DNA test. I bought one for my mother back, Christmas of 2018, and she did it. She liked it. I mean, she didn't fully agree with the results, but I mean, what are you going to do? So I did one for myself because the big thing with my podcast and being from Cape Cod and all of my books, I say I'm a 12th generation Cape Codder, and that's good. I have 99.9% confidence in my tree going back. So my family's the Doan family that helped us settle the town of Eastham, Massachusetts on Cape Cod. I traced it back. Deacon John Doan is my 9th great grandfather. And I traced the tree back, God, a good 700 years with pretty good confidence thanks to Ancestry.com. And so I did the DNA thing to kind of give the proof. And so you get a little vial you've got to spit into, and then there's this blue liquid. You mix it, put it in. They give you a first class envelope, and you send the envelope to them. I did it at Christmas time, so it took me 5 weeks to get it, the actual envelope, and then another few weeks for them to get it and process it. So if you're looking to do it now, it probably won't take as long, but I did it during the Christmas rush because I'm smart like that. So the main thing, when you get your results, it's percentages. So I can't think offhand. I call this without a map because I don't have notes. There's literally nothing in front of me. I'm sitting on a floor, kind of in a storage room in my house. So, because it's got good sound. It won't echo. So that's why I'm in here. But they give you percentages. My top percentage was English, naturally. The Doan family, that's England, so there you go. Second highest was Irish, and that, my grandfather, John Sullivan, you can't get too much more Irish than that. And as people come into the chat, I try to hit the wave button just so I know you're there, because I don't want this to be one way where I'm just kind of, especially this is the third time I've tried. This is, the third time that I've tried to do this today. So I'm pretty much going over all the hits that I did in the first one. So for people that weren't in either of the first two chats, what happened was I went to, it's called Early Road Beach, and it's in West Harwich, and it's awesome. There's a kind of parking lot set back from the road and from the beach, so I could hide in there and do my live stream and then get out and show everyone the beach. I was about 15 minutes into my first live stream, it shut off. I said, "Oh, you gotta be kidding me." So I started it right back up, went through the same spiel again with everything I was talking about, and I was almost done. Literally all I had to say was, "Thanks everyone for watching, and go check out the podcast," and hit save. And nope, it crapped out again after 35 minutes. I wish it had kept recording. You would have seen me go nuts, but what are you going to do? So yeah, so back to where I was. So I did the Ancestry DNA. If anyone's thinking of doing it, I highly recommend it. Normally it's $99, but they do a lot of deals. So I got mine for $49 and it was worth it. What they do is after you get your percentages, you also get a list of all the other Ancestry members that share your DNA. So naturally, my mother was at the top. So she was there, and then I had some first and second cousins that were on there, and it brings you all the way down to people that have like 1% DNA shared with you. I would be not kidding if I said like 2,000 people on there that are my relatives, but no one famous yet. So definitely do the Ancestry DNA. On the podcast, I get more into specific percentages and what I thought about what I expected my nationalities to be. It's not that far off. I'm not Italian. I thought I would be, but oh well. My mother still thinks that it must be wrong, but I'll go with the DNA, people. So also on the podcast, I call it In Their Footsteps. It's kind of my history, more of a long form story. This week for episode 12, I did Rocky Point Amusement Park. I don't know if anybody out there is familiar with Rocky Point. It was in Warwick, Rhode Island, and it existed in one form or another for about 150 years. And it started in 1847. It was a guy that had a steamboat would take people over there for picnics. And eventually when Coney Island got big in New York, that was when they got all their rides and the great attractions. So as a kid, I never went. I grew up on Cape Cod, so I would see the ads for Rocky Point on the Providence stations, like WJAR and the other one, WPRI. And so I knew Rocky Point, but I never got to go. Because who in the world? So growing up, my sister Ashley's in the chat there, but there's 5 of us kids. There's no way that our parents were going to drive us to Rhode Island. If I was the oldest at the time, I would have been 11 or 12. And the youngest, how old would you have been? Like 5? It's like, no way they would bring us. They'd bring us and leave us there. So I never got to go. And they got in trouble with taxes where they weren't paying their taxes. So the state in 94 took away their concession license. So they couldn't sell any food or drinks until they paid their taxes. And eventually they did. That's Ashley saying the Barnstable County Fair was our thing. Oh, God. Yeah, Rocky Point was one of the OGs of New England amusement parks. So anyone who is either in the chat or sees this later on, when you think of original New England amusement parks, I mean, Six Flags used to be Riverside, way out in Agawam, Massachusetts. I went when I was 11 to Aquaboggan Water Park, which was in Saco, Maine. It's still there. My Aunt Kelly and her then husband Mark, because I was the oldest, they would take me places and make the other kids jealous. So I went to Aquaboggin, and what I remember about Aquaboggin was there was this like a dome on the top that had a sprinkler, and there were ropes on all around it, and you could use the ropes to climb up to the top. And I don't know if you got anything when you got to the top, but I know that people at the bottom had squirt guns to try to shoot you down. That was fun. I wonder if I could get on that ride now and go back and try it. But so Rocky Point got closed in 95. They tore down a lot of the rides, but I went there in 2015. I finally get to go 20 years after they closed. And so I'm going to show you what they had. They had parts of the rides. So this is the arch. And that's one of the more famous parts of Rocky Point. And I'm thinking they said they made a few for the World's Fair. And obviously Warwick got one. If you go there now, it's repainted and it looks good. Here it's just rusty and awful. But I remembered seeing it in photos, so I thought it was important to get pictures. So that is still there, and it looks good. And this is the other part. So you can see where it would have carried cars or the seats, almost like a ski lift. This also looks better now, where it got repainted. So you can go to Rocky Point and you can see these places. And what they have now is they have a map, and they have little plaques that will show you what was there. So you're walking around the grounds of Rocky Point and it'll say, oh, here was the arch. So you get a better idea, because when I went there, I had no idea what anything was. It's just a state park now with it looked like random trash just there, but it's parts of the rides. I go more into depth in the podcast about Rocky Point. If anyone hasn't listened to any of the podcasts before, so it's the In My Footsteps podcast. That's why I name these live streams that. But it's Buzzsprout is where it's my hosting site. And then from there, it kind of gets sent out to all of the major streaming platforms. So we're talking iTunes, Pandora, Amazon, Spotify. It's on all of them, and you can't miss it. The logo, see now this, I have my photos open at the bottom. So I'm going to, there, that's what you'll see. I do special logos for each episode. And so this one here, you can see in the corner the film projector in the film. That has to do with my retro segment. So for this episode of the podcast, I talked about the days when you would go into school and it would be just an awful morning. You're thinking it's going to be the worst day ever. And you go into class and it's dark and there's either a film projector or a TV there. And you know you're going to get to watch some kind of, film strip or educational TV. And I don't know if anyone out there, if you remember watching them, that's one thing. But if you remembered any specific ones, that I had trouble with. I couldn't remember the actual ones that we watched. So I was lucky. I found 2 websites that I'm going to share. I shared them on the first stream, and then obviously that got cut off. So the first one, it's a woman has a blog called the Jennifer Chronicles. Her site is Gen X, Jen X67. And she's got a shorter list of some of the old school film strips. 2 of them on there I saw that I remembered. I don't know if anyone remembers The Red Balloon, which was a French film, probably, I would say early 60s. I saw it in regular class and French class. And it's basically a little boy walking the streets of Paris with a sentient red balloon that follows him around. And that one I remember watching. The other one was Donald Duck in Math Magic Land, which everything's in the title that you need to know. It's Donald Duck, it's math, and it's magic. You'd remember that. Anyone that's my age or around it, so, Ashley, you took Spanish. Ashley says she took Spanish. Well, French class, I had Mr. Welsh. And my French teacher used to do videos where he would go to these different places. I remember he went to Martinique in the Caribbean. And if my buddy Steve ever watches this, he'll remember Monsieur Welsh. And he would make these videos. And I actually do these 4K videos around New England that I put up on YouTube. And every time I do these videos, I think of Mr. Welsh, my French teacher. And the title would be in French, Visitons la Martinique. It's like, all right, we get it. You know French. But I also found another website for school films. And this is afana.org, afana.org. They have a section on there. It's literally just films you watched in school. And they have close to 200. The only problem with the Afana site is they give you the title, director, and when it was made. They don't tell you what it is. So you have to kind of go by the title and guess. So anybody out there remember Red Asphalt? So Red Asphalt is a series of 5 videos over from the 60s to the 2000s. It's basically for driver's ed, where it's very, well, not super duper graphic, but graphic enough when you're 15 and 16 about the dangers of driving unsafely. So that was in there. There was a one just called the New England region. I'm reading the chat. Sorry, this is exhilarating. Pamplona's greatest hits. Anyone out there? Oh, the Running of the Bulls. Okay. But so if you click on any of the ones in the afana.org, most of them take you to the website archive.org. And they've got tons. And I watched a few minutes of a bunch, and I would say, I don't remember this, get out. So in the podcast, I talked more about those few that I mentioned. But then the ones I really remembered were the educational TV shows. Now, I'm sure anybody who's, I would say, 50 and under would remember Reading Rainbow with LeVar Burton. That was one we watched all the time. And I just remember the theme song, the Take a Look, It's in a Book, Reading Rainbow. We used to watch that. I think every now and then the teacher would have us read a book that LeVar Burton would mention. But that was good. Younger people wouldn't remember 3-2-1 Contact, but that was more of a science and technology show. And that kind of took the mantle from the Electric Company, sort of like that next generation. And then, all right, so after 3-2-1 Contact and Reading Rainbow, then there were others that we didn't watch in school, but I remember Mr. Wizard's World was one that we always watched. But that's basically, I go over more in the podcast about those film strips and educational TV shows. And I'm going to do another one in the future because you'll remember one thing and it'll bring up something else. And that's where you kind of remember, like, make notes for later. I got to do another one on that. And that's why I like this live stream, because you can see my thought process where I start down one road and I get an idea and I just go with it. So it's not total chaos because I keep coming back to the podcast, but it gets close. My mind just starts. I also do This Week in History on the podcast, and that's a lot of fun. I call it low-hanging fruit because it's easy. I do 4 stories for each episode, and it's usually a local, national, world, and pop culture. And you can do it every week. And I'm big into history, and I like going down the rabbit hole as far as research goes. So they have online newspaper archives, especially Cape Cod. I've got 5 or 6 different newspapers that I could just go in and type my name and find something. I found my grandmother and grandfather's wedding announcement from 1947 was in our local paper, the Barnstable Patriot. It was wild because I could see wedding announcements today, even still, but then they had a story in the paper about their honeymoon, that they were honeymooning in New York, and it's like, I couldn't imagine that in 2021. Like, Sue and Dan got married. That's great. Well, now Sue and Dan are on vacation on their honeymoon in Illinois. It's like, well, okay. Unless they're famous, I don't think many people outside the family would care. But I thought that was funny. One of the things I'm looking for now is actually I'm trying to find the address of my great-grandparents' donut shop in Hampton Beach, New Hampshire. Thus far, no luck. I may have to just go drive up there. But this week in history, it's a lot of fun. I did, like, for this episode that just dropped yesterday, was the original Monopoly game. So it got trademarked. That's the secret when I say it in the episode. The guy, Charles Darrow, that is credited with creating it, he actually didn't create it. He actually trademarked it, and there was a woman that had created it 30 years earlier, and it was called The Landlord's Game. So it's interesting facts like that. I find, because not everyone likes history, so I got to find things that are interesting to talk about. So Monopoly, everyone knows. There's a guy that invented earmuffs that lived in Farmington, Maine. Maybe that's only interesting to me. But that's good. I do it. It's every week. I do This Week in History. So if you don't like one week, maybe another week would be better. I also started doing something called a time capsule, where I say it's like you throw a dart at a date in history, and I just tell people the number one song, movie, TV show, and then the price of something from back then to kind of wrap it up in a bow. I was doing the price of a gallon of gas, but that gets kind of boring because there's not a lot of fluctuation. It goes from like $1 to $4, and it's okay. So I did, for this last episode, I did the cheapest car in America. So it was a date in 1990. And it's the cheapest car in America, and it was the Yugo GV. I don't know if anyone out there owned a Yugo. No offense, but anyone who grew up in those times knows it didn't age well. It's like having one of those Tonka trucks that you put the battery in and drive it around the yard. That would have been a better car than the Yugo. So I don't know if anyone out there in the chat, if you've listened to the podcast before or seen any of my YouTube videos. I started this live stream as another way to interact with people because I do the podcast. I promote the hell out of it. I mean, I promote it on here all the time. And then I do one segment from each podcast, and it becomes a YouTube video. This week, it's going to be the Point Amusement Park, and some of the photos I showed you will be in there. But I also eventually want to do a Q&A segment where I'll be doing live streams and people ask questions and I take them and use them in the podcast. Because some of the podcasts I listen to, I love that sort of off-the-cuff kind of banter. Because when I do a podcast, it's very regimented. Intro, same song every time. James River by a man named DJ Williams. It's awesome. And then it's, hello world is what I always say. And I talk about how the week's been. And there's usually 4 segments. Closing, see you later. With this, it's more interactive. And I've been doing my research as far as how to get more eyes on my content. Because there's only so much you can do. You can't force people to find it. And if it's not being seen, you got to bring people to it. Luckily, this live stream has gone a lot better than the first 2 today. Maybe I'll just do them from in this room here. This is a lot better. This is just like wall backing. It's weird. It looks kind of Christmassy. I wasn't expecting that. I'm sitting on a stool, not a stool, a step that you would use in a gym because I don't want to sit on the floor. And I didn't want to sit on this, so I have this inner tube for sledding. I was going to sit on that, and I said I'm going to end up look like I'm laying down. But yeah, so the podcast, I do 3 weeks on, 1 week off is the basics of it. So this coming week, I've already recorded most of what's going to be coming out this coming Thursday. And so this Thursday, it's going to be, I've recorded most of it. I don't record it all at once because you can see as I do the live stream how I zig and zag and I random and I say the wrong word, so I have to have time to edit it. But this coming one, I'm going to talk about Chuck E. Cheese. So anybody that is my age, a little older, I'm talking 50 and below, you've got to remember, because Chuck E. Cheese is still around. So I go in depth about that. There's a lot I didn't know about Chuck E. Cheese. But I'll tell you one thing. We had one on Cape Cod. Ashley, I don't know if you ever went there. You would have been too young. But it was in Hyannis. Yeah, James, yes, the bulb. So I get into that. So you'll remember then. We had one in Hyannis that I thought it was there for like 10 years. No lie, it was there 2.5 years. And the only reason I know is because I was doing the research in the paper, and in early 87, they had an ad in there that they were selling everything. I said, that can't be right. But I went there a couple times, and I was terrified of the animatronic animals, especially the king. The king was legit a 9-foot tall lion with an Elvis cape. And he sung Elvis, but he didn't sing. It was all like jerky and like very, it was terrifying when you're 9, 10 years old to have this thing towering over you. So I talk about Chuck E. Cheese. I also go into the Outermost House. I don't know if anyone's familiar with the book. Henry Beston wrote it about a dune shack he had built out just south of Coast Guard Beach in Eastham. It's a very well-known book, and it's one of the most famous about Cape Cod. But I go more in depth as to what happened to the house itself after Henry Beston did his book and moved away. And that's interesting. I mean, it's not a happy ending. It's not there anymore. But yeah, that's coming this coming Thursday. I already have the artwork for it. So there's a sneak preview because it's spring. This is what I do. I come up with the idea for the artwork. So each one is specific to the episode. And so that's what I did there for episode 13, because it'll be right when it hits spring. So there you go. There's that. I also, for anyone who has listened to the podcast, I wanted to share this because I really appreciate, this is a passion project of mine. I love creating content and sharing it and getting feedback and having people that actually tune in to each one. I really love that. And it makes me want to keep doing it. And luckily, having passed 500 downloads is pretty good. And I've learned a lot through listening to other podcasts that you've got to be patient and you've got to, grow your audience. So that's what I'm doing. So you don't look at it as I need to hit a certain amount of downloads immediately. It's like you just keep giving the content, because what I'll notice is somebody will listen to, let's say, this newest episode 12, and they'll like it, and suddenly they'll start listening to all the other ones. And that's how you build your audience. And then I've been doing research for, it's Landon. I was talking about you. So my nephew Landon just popped on. And during my second live stream today that got cut short, I was actually talking about him when it got cut off. And I said, that's kind of weird. But I've been doing research I wanted the podcast to be New England centric, not just Cape Cod. You want slightly larger audience. If you didn't grow up on Cape Cod, I have to make you care about a lot of the stuff I'm talking about. So it's New England centric. And I've done so much research that I could theoretically not do another minute of research and do this podcast for 4 years. And I think that's plenty of time to hopefully build an audience. If I've done 4 years worth of podcasts and I still have not made it, where I've got any sort of audience, then I think it's probably time to hang it up. But hopefully you've listened to some, enjoyed at least something, because I try to make it where there's something for everyone without it being too chaotic. So I do the history and the travel and the nostalgia. I'm starting to do more lifestyle and general entertainment. And then I like to tell embarrassing stories of myself, which, I don't mind. It's like if you self-deprecating humor is the best. So episode 11, if any of you have not listened to it, I did a story about, we used to play a game called Manhunt. It's hide and seek in the dark. So we just called it Manhunt. And we played throughout the entire neighborhood, which ended up being like a 12-acre area, which is pretty big, in the dark. And we were 9, 10, 11 years old. And I had a hockey mask, Friday the 13th. And I painted it all up to look just like Jason Voorhees, and it glowed in the dark. So I'd be out there. I was always the seeker. And I had the big mask on, and I'd hide and scare the hell out of everybody. And there was one girl that played with us, and she was terrified. She was probably 8, and I was 11 or 12. So in order to make her feel at ease, we gave her a golf club to hold it and feel that she was protected. And little did I know that she was standing not too far from my house. So that was the home base, was our front yard, front step. You had to go hide and then come back and make it to the step safe. And she didn't go too far. And she was hiding in the front yard. And I snuck up on her and scared her. And she turned and swung that golf club and hit me right between the eyes with it. And she cracked that mask. And I went down. But that one was pretty funny. The funniest one, Ashley, you'll remember this, I've told it a billion times, was my friend Matt. He always wanted to be the seeker. And I would say, no, you're not wearing my Jason mask. So one time I relented and I gave him my Freddy Krueger glove and the fedora hat. And so we both were out there doing the seeking. And at the end, it was supposed to be a big climactic scene where the two killers fought each other. So we get to the end. We're in our backyard. The spotlight is on. All of us, all the other kids are gathered around. And Matt and I are ready to fight it out. And we come at each other and we grappled for like 5 seconds. And we both slipped in my dog's poop and fell in it and rolled in it. And it's just, it ended the game so fast. I remember I told that story, and the first thing my mother said was, someone forgot to clean up the yard. I'm like, I know. So I don't mind telling stories that embarrass me. But I wanted to give a shout out to Landon because he is going to be doing photography class in high school. And as soon as you're good to go with that, I can show you some stuff. I'm not super talented as far as it goes. My buddy Steve is way more accomplished, but I know some stuff, so I can help you with that. And in reality, tomorrow I'm actually going with him. We're going to go do a big, long photo shoot. I think we're going out to the Old Stone Church in West Boylston, which is bucket list. I've wanted to go there for a while. And I'm going to interview him for podcast episode 14, something called Dedication to the Craft, which is what we call getting the good photo, whether it's balancing yourself on a tree branch or going out in the rain and snow to get a certain shot. We had one time we went to a lighthouse in Groton, Connecticut, and it's called Avery Point, and it looks like a Barbie castle, like a pink castle. And I wanted to go down into the rocks by the water and get a shot looking up at it. And I went down and I slipped and went down on my elbow and my ankle. And I laid there in the rocks and still took the shot. And I looked at Steve and I said, there, dedication to the craft. And that's kind of where we've gotten, where we just say it all the time. But I wanted to thank anyone and everyone who has listened to the podcast, watched any of the videos on YouTube. I'm going to have this one will actually go up there unless it cuts out in the next 2 seconds, which I'll bash my head against the wall if it does. But I'm going to put up another video. It's going to be Rocky Point. If you listen to the podcast and you like it, shoot me a message. You can DM me on here, on Instagram, on Twitter, any of those things. But I try to do these Fridays at 5, but obviously today, getting it cut off twice, I decided to do it now. So I don't know if anyone out there that does live videos, what you feel the best time is to do these to get the most eyes on it. I mean, one way or another, it's going to go up on IGTV so everyone can see it after the fact. But I'm always looking for input as far as things like that. Steve, I was just talking about you, about dedication to the craft, so just wanted to let you know. Steve just popped in. You're not coming on my screen this time. Sorry. But he and I are going to go for a photo shoot tomorrow. There may be a 4K video coming from it for anyone that enjoys those. Old Stone Church I've been waiting to go there for a long time. But thank you all so much. And I'm going to now shut this down and save it. And I'll try to do 5 o'clock Friday next week. But this is actually more people have popped in than did when it was 5 o'clock. So maybe I'll do them later. I don't know. We'll see how it goes. But thank you so much for coming on for my Without a Map podcast post-game, kind of my Talking Dead. I appreciate it, and I will see you all sooner than later.